Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to the Air Raid Hour. My name is Steve Mathis. You can find me on Twitter at Judge Mathis, joined as always by my co-host, Dave Tilton. You can find him on Twitter at Tilt Money. Together, we are the Bills guys. This is presented by the Cover One Sports Network. And we got two special guests with us this evening. We're going to get to them in a minute. But before we do, a couple of show notes. Dave, we're about to do something that we have never done before, I don't think. We're taking a vacation.
We have never done this. I mean, I remember it must have been, it wasn't last summer or the summer before. I was in Hilton Head on vacation in my hotel room, and I was like, nope, can't miss the show. Came back, recorded, did it all. Like, we just don't do this. It's like, it's going to feel weird. I'm going to get a little antsy probably by the end of it, but it is time, right? Like, I mean, it is time for us to take a little bit.
So Dave and Steve, we are going on vacation. We're taking, after the show, we're taking the next 3 weeks off. Like, we've usually like pre-recorded shows, had 4th of July shows, all that stuff. For 3 years, I don't think we've missed a week. But we're going to take a little 3-week break, and we'll be back July 18th after this show. With our first of our 2-part training camp preview. So for the next 3 weeks, you will have to somehow survive in your life without the Air Raid Hour. But if you're looking for the Air Raid Hour, you can find us all over, obviously here at YouTube at the Cover One Sports Network, on Twitter at the Bills guys. I'm sure I'll still probably be tweeting from vacation, on TikTok at Air Raid Buffalo, on YouTube at Cover1_Air Raid Buffalo. And hey, we take this show and we turn it into little segments, and we podcast said segments. So you can listen to any segment from all of our shows from all over the summer on demand on Apple and Spotify and all major podcasting platforms. So you can catch us there. If you just miss our voice and you just want to listen to us on your walk or your stroll or whatever, your workout, you need something to help you pump that extra 10 pounds. You can put on the Air Raid Hour on your podcasting platform of choice. But enough of this. It's time for what the people are actually here for, and that's our two special guests this evening. We are joined by the two newest members of the Cover One Sports Network. Ryan Sullivan, you can find him on Twitter at SportsRoc2, and Hansel, I'm not actually sure what your last name is, man, to be honest with you. I don't know if you want people to know. And you can find him on Twitter at UberHansen.
You go.
No, you're good. Let's start with you, Hansen. If you want to reveal your full name, go for it, and tell the people what you're going to do here at Cover One.
My full name is actually Hans Hansen. Very original, I know. I'm actually the third, so I share the name with my father and grandfather as well. But I go by Hansel on all these shows on Twitter and everywhere. People seem to like that, and I get the GIF from Zoolander all the time, which I enjoy. But yeah, with Cover One, mainly just going to be doing written content. I'm sure I'll be hopping on these shows every once in a while, or podcasts or what have you. The main thing as of now, during the season, I do these things called matchup previews. You can find them on Reddit in years past. Those will be coming to Cover One, and then I'll also be spitting out some other random stuff as the off season goes on as well.
Nice. And Ryan, tell the people where they can find you and what you'll be doing here at Cover One.
I'll be just doing some writing at SportsRoc2 on Twitter. It'll be all on the Cover One site. That's how I kind of got into the content game as a writer. I don't know how you guys do podcasting every week. It was a little bit too much for me. Writing, I can take a couple of days, get it, research. Don't have to, get it in by a certain time. So, so I'll be taking my time doing some about article a week-ish, give or take. Here or there. So that's where you can find me.
Nice. We're looking forward to it, gentlemen. And this is the time of year where it's difficult to come up with Buffalo Bills content. And we're going to be rolling through with a number of various different topics tonight. And I'm super pumped for a lot of these different segments that we have planned. I think they're, original, they're fun, they're well thought out. So we're going to have fun debating back and forth. But just remember in the comment section, as we're going through our various different topics and segments tonight, feel free to chime in with your own opinion, because you are just as much a part of this show as we are. So make sure you're staying active there in the comment section. And if you have a topic or a segment suggestion for us, there will be time at the end to suggest your own topic or segment as well. So that is something you have to look forward to. Before we get started here, I'm going to put you guys on the spot. I didn't put this one in the show notes. I want one word to describe the feeling between the end of mandatory minicamp to the start of training camp, that sort of month-long period, late June through the July, what is one word as a Bills fan to describe that time period? Dave, I'm going to start with you. Give these two guys a chance to think about it.
I will say the one word to describe that month is probably painstaking. I don't know. That's the word. That's the word that comes to mind, just because as a content creator, like you said, like usually, obviously during the season, it sets you up, right? Like you have the game previews, you have the game reactions. It's a lot easier during the season to kind of, talk about the Bills and sort of what's going on with the actual games. And then you got free agency, the draft, and all these other things. But then this like month kind of creeps up and you're like, it's kind of a painstaking month, but it is a good month because it gives people, I think, a chance to, maybe enjoy their summer a little bit, like we're doing, taking a couple weeks off, like maybe get recharged, right? Recharge for the start of the season. So on one hand, it's painstaking, but on the other hand, maybe it's a little bit of a recharge as well.
Hansel, how about you? What is one word to describe that this month-long period?
Careful how I pronounce, because I don't want people to misinterpret the word we're using here. Ornery. I'll be very ornery this next month. I don't do well when there's no football. And when there's not many topics going on, there's going to be some really good NFL topics, but if everything works out for the Bills over this next month, we basically won't hear anything about the Bills, which is going to be a little frustrating. So it'll be a little difficult. I'm sure we're getting some spats with people on Twitter from the Dolphins fan base and the Patriots fan base. That's nothing for me.
And Pops Mafia comes in and says, hey, kudos to the Buffalo Bills, too. They're still pumping out some really solid content. That Dawson Knox video, all the different Bills embedded, the different videos they're posting on YouTube, that stuff is absolute gold. So head on over to the Buffalo Bills YouTube account, and they're pumping out a ton of content all summer as well. So kudos to them. But Ryan, how about you? What's one word you would use?
I'm going to go the opposite. I think it's relaxing. I don't have to worry, because as much as I love watching Bills football, it's stressful. The season is stressful, especially when you get into the middle, especially after a loss. Every game is so high stakes that it wears on you. And it's fun, and I love watching them. But this chunk of the season where I don't need to worry about trades, draft, and I can sit, a lot of my mood is sometimes dictated by the Yankees, who are playing really well right now. So that's fun, but it's relaxing. I try to enjoy it. I try, we consume so much football all year long that it's nice to have a step back, relax, breathe. I can enjoy my summer. It's relaxing. And obviously I'm excited when the season comes along, but I think it's, especially now that I've been in content creation for 2 years now, off and on. I find it relaxing.
We got Renaissance Man coming in saying, I keep telling myself training camp starts in 34 days. In the meantime, I'm enjoying my summer. Yeah, that's why I'll be in Buffalo starting on Wednesday morning. So Wednesday morning, my flight leaves. I'll be in Buffalo. I'm going on a nice little road trip. So distraction, right? Or distracted would be the adjective that I would use. You get a chance to sort of my wife's it's the best month of the year is pretty much according to her, the month of July. But man, I can't wait to get back and have these shows again where we can start reacting instead of projecting and who did this at camp? Who did that at camp? So I'm going to be biting my nails until, July 25th or so when training camp comes back. All right, let's jump into some of these topics where we're going to project or make projections or try to look into the future and philosophize about, is that even a word? I don't know, about what the Buffalo Bills season is going to look like in 2022. And Ryan, I want to start with an article that you wrote for Cover One. It was the first article that you wrote, and it was all about Von Miller's projected usage under Sean McDermott. We know the Buffalo Bills have historically, or Sean McDermott has historically utilized a rotation of defensive linemen here with the Buffalo Bills. And it's difficult for a defensive lineman to see a significant amount of snaps, significant being, up in the upper 50s, low 60% of the snaps. So a lot of people, I think, are concerned about how Von Miller will be used in this defense. The Buffalo Bills are paying him so much money. Explain your article and some of the research you did on Sean McDermott and some of the pass rushers he's had at previous stops during his coaching career.
So let's start here. The number one edge rusher for all 5 years that McDermott's been here is pretty inarguably been Jerry Hughes. He's been the best pass rusher on this team. You know, we can debate pressure stats, whatever. He's been, maybe you can say this year was Mario Addison, but for at least 4 of the last 5 years, he's been the best pass rusher on this team. Around 65% of snaps, give or take. Not a ton compared to a lot of other guys. As much as we love Jerry Hughes, as much as I love Jerry Hughes, probably even more than most people, he's not a tier 1 edge rusher. He's not even a tier 2 edge rusher. And he might not even be a tier 3 edge rusher. He's very good at his job. He's been very good at his job for his while, but he's never been an upper echelon guy, except maybe for a couple years under Penn and Rex Ryan. But ever since then, he's never been a top tier guy. So when we say things like McDermott doesn't play his pass rush or significant number of snaps, I kind of wanted to see if he's ever had a really good pass rusher. And I kind of identified 3 players over the course of his time as a defensive coordinator that were really good. He had his first one when he first took over the job from the late Jim Johnson in 2009, 2010. He had Trent Cole. He had 22.5 sacks over that period of time. In Carolina from 2011 to 2013, he had Charles Johnson, who racked up 32.5 sacks over a 3-year period. And he had Greg Hardy in 2012 and 2013, who had racked up 26 sacks over a 2-year period. So those are all guys I think you could classify when they were at their peak, when they were with McDermott, were at least tier 2 pass rushers. Were Pro Bowl, all pro caliber players under McDermott. So what did their snap count look like? Well, you start with Trent Cole. Now, PFF doesn't keep Pro Football Focus doesn't keep. No, sorry. Pro Football Reference. I always get them confused. Pro Football Reference doesn't keep snap count percentage until 2012, but luckily PFF keeps snap counts, actual snap counts, so you can average them out. So Trent Cole in his 2 years with McDermott in Philadelphia was 58.5 snaps per game and 54.5 snaps per game. That probably puts you around 80 to 85% of snaps, depending on how many snaps are in the game. I kind of guessed ballpark when I was looking at the other one. Charles Johnson, you look at they kept, starting in 2012, he played 79% of snaps. In 2013, he played 80% of snaps. And then Greg Hardy, in his 2 really good years, he played 80 and 86% of the snaps. So he played a lot. They all played a significant amount of snaps. And you go to that 2013 Panthers team where Greg Hardy and Charles Johnson are racking up, almost 26 sacks between the 2 of them. And they're playing 80% and 86% of the snaps. They're not coming off the field a whole ton of the time. So if you go back and you look at, the point is, if you go back and look at McDermott's history, he hasn't been afraid to lean on guys. He hasn't been afraid to play guys significant amount of snaps when they're really good. Greg Hardy was really good in Carolina before he had his issues. Charles Johnson had 3 really good years, before his kind of window ran out there. And, maybe you could say it was Ron Rivera's defense. Maybe you could say, but the point is that he's done this before. It's not something that's new to him. So it brings you to Von Miller. Von Miller, if you go to last season, he played 76% of the snaps in Denver, played 79% of the snaps in LA. So that falls into a range where McDermott has used guys before. So I think there's this fear. Now, maybe I think it is important to note, 2013, that's almost 9 years ago now. So it's important to note, has McDermott changed? Maybe. But Von Miller's very vocal that he doesn't like to come off the field. So I don't think it's projecting too much. I don't think it's a hope. I don't think it's a wild prediction to say, hey, McDermott's going to come in, Von Miller's going to come in and play 75% of snaps, play 80% of snaps down the stretch. Now, could we maybe see them load management if they have an early game where they get up 20 points in a game? Will they keep Von Miller out? Maybe. If will they maybe skew snaps towards the fourth quarter of him? Maybe. Will they play more down the stretch? I would imagine they may do some load management stuff because that's the Bills and that's kind of what they do. But I think when push comes to shove, when you get into November, December, January, you are going to see him playing 70, 75, 80% of snaps if called on. And I don't think it's really something that we need to worry about as Bills fans based on just the history of Sean McDermott.
Yeah, and that's an interesting point. You utilize that term load management, which is sort of an NBA term that they're utilizing now, resting players, giving players days off, etc. Now, in the NFL, you don't really hear that term a lot because players are expected to play every week. And for the most part, Von Miller's going to play every week. But I think you're spot on there when you talk about how his percentage could be like, he might just be 55, 60% at the beginning of the year. But when you get into that playoff time, it could really start to kick up because Jason Taylor comes in and says, some of these other guys, Trent Cole, Greg Hardy, Charles Johnson, I don't have that number off the top of my head, but chances are they were probably a little younger than Von Miller is now. And Von Miller has sort of made those comments before too, like, hey, maybe this rotation will kind of be good for me because I am getting a little bit older. But I think we all want that rotation thrown in the garbage when we get into the postseason. Hansen, what do you think about projecting sort of the Buffalo Bills defensive line rotation with the new pieces that they have in place? Do you want to continue seeing a replication of what we've seen the previous 3-4 years under McDermott, or would you like to see some of the changes to the rotation?
Yeah, so I have an interesting opinion on so have been a great team at pressuring the quarterback the past couple years. Last year, they were the number one team in pressuring the quarterback in the NFL. The problem was they weren't bringing down the quarterback. Even though they still ranked fairly high in sacks, that number was kind of inflated the last game against the Jets, where I think they had 7 sacks. So I think the rotation, there's benefits to that. Where there's not a benefit to it is in a game like against the Chiefs. We were getting pressure on at times. There was like a one play where Ed Oliver was right in his face. We just didn't bring him down. And that ended up being our downfall in that game, in my opinion. When it comes to Von Miller, I just can't see somebody of his caliber doing the same rotation that Jerry Hughes did for years and years. It has to be north of 60%. I can't imagine him not on the field unless, like Ryan said, it's a complete blowout. And in which case, why risk the injury to Miller? But saying that, I still think you're going to see that kind of rotation, like bringing like a Boogie Bash, maybe Shaq Lawson or AJ, depending on how this whole training camp works out. But the one spot where I really see Von Miller is he's been pretty vocal about the fourth quarter. He wants to be on the field basically every single snap and in the fourth quarter in crunch time. So I think when it comes to the later of the game, the later portion of the season, you're going to see a lot more uses of Von Miller. In the early second quarter, it might be more split 50-50.
Mm-hmm. Dave, how about you? What are your thoughts on the Bills' defensive line rotation moving forward in the future?
I don't mind the rotation so much, right? Early in games. I mean, I was pretty vocal with my sort of description of Von Miller on prior shows of him being a closer. Like, Brian's a big Yankees fan. Aroldis Chapman, right? Like he's in there at the end of the game. He's in there to close out games. He's been that guy. Well, he's been that guy his whole career, going back to Denver, right? Even though those early years where Peyton Manning wasn't there and they weren't blowing teams out, like he was making game-changing plays at the end of games, stopping teams from coming back, finishing plays with sacks, getting to the quarterback, like Hansen said, like actually getting the quarterback and making those game-changing plays when they mattered. And he did that throughout his career, and he has continued to do that, and he's done it in the playoffs as well, right? I mean, he did it with the Rams. He did it for the Broncos in their Super Bowl against Carolina. So, like, he has done it in the biggest moments, in the biggest games. And so from a rotation perspective, if you want to talk about load management, as long as he's in the game at the most critical junctures, and that doesn't necessarily mean it's only fourth quarter, right? It could be end of first half, could be end of whatever. Like, he's going to be in the game for the most critical moments. And so I wouldn't be surprised. Like his career average, I think he's over 80% snap count for his career average. And last year he was down a little, and obviously he missed the entire 2020 season with the ACL injury. But other than that, he's always been an 80% plus guy on the field snap count. And so the Bills didn't just pay him a ton of money for him to just be part of a rotation where just because it's like, quote, his turn in the rotation to be off the field, like he's going to be off the field. I just don't see that happening. Now, the rest of the rotation, maybe so, like maybe Epinesa and Basham and Rousseau, even to an extent, maybe rotate a bit more. But out of all those edge guys, I would be shocked if Von Miller wasn't the highest percentage snap count.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at it, last year we had these conversations in the middle of the season where I wanted to see Ed Oliver's snap count rise significantly. And the reason why is because there wasn't as much talent around him. I feel like a lot of the defensive tackles last year were struggling. Hopefully the Buffalo Bills have reset their defensive line for what feels like the third time in 3 years, the third time in 4 years. Hopefully this is the reset that really works and allows the Buffalo Bills to continue on with that rotation, because this rotation could be what's best for Von Miller. But because, you have him in December, you have him in the playoffs, and he'll be fresh. But that being said, I still want to see, I don't need to see 75%, 80%, but I would like to see Von Miller, and I would like to see the other two guys that I'm deeming on the Buffalo Bills defensive line to be studs, or at least I want to be studs, Ed Oliver and Gregory Rousseau. I want to see Miller, Oliver, and Rousseau. I want those to be your three alphas, and I want all three of them to push 60% snap share a game, depending on obviously how the game is going. If there's a blowout, you can take him out early. But Von Miller, you paid him the way you paid him for a reason. You're sacrificing other players on this roster. We're having a conversation about Jordan Poyer's future on the show on a bi-weekly basis because of all the money that we gave to Von Miller. So you paid the man. He should go out there and play. That's number one. Ed Oliver, I think he's got the most potential of anyone on that defensive line, especially with the attention that's going to go to Von Miller. And Ed Oliver in himself can be a game breaker or a game wrecker if he can get into a rhythm and if he can be on the field enough to have his presence felt. And then last but not least, Gregory Rousseau. You have that first round investment, right? So you've seen what he can do as a run defender. I want to see what he can do in pass rush situations. It feels like last year they were always taking him off the field in some of these pin your ear back situations, and that sort of hurt what his box score statistics look like from a pass rushing standpoint. So I would like to see Gregory Rousseau's run stopping ability get rewarded with maybe a few extra snaps in some pass rushing situations. So that's my thought there, sort of on the usage of the Buffalo Bills defensive line. And that leads us, Hansel, to one of your first contributions to the Cover One Network. And this didn't come in an article. Now that I think about it, you probably should write an article about this, because you posted a stat into the Cover One group chat, and it sort of inspired me. I went and I did a nice little TikTok on it, and it was a really cool stat. I want you to share that stat with us, and it has to do with Gabriel Davis and Dawson Knox, because both of these guys, Dawson Knox in a contract year, Gabriel Davis has 2 years left on his deal. With the way the Buffalo Bills are spending money, could call into question which player is more important to the Bills' future, because you might only be able to keep one or the other. So what is the statistic that you sort of uncovered about Gabriel Davis and Dawson Knox and their effect on the Buffalo Bills offense?
So I'll start with the story on why this happened. So we were like discussing it as a group, right? Just Dawson Knox in general and possible extensions in the future and what have you. But I put out a poll. I was like, what would you prefer to have, a top 6 tight end as your tight end 1 or a top 20 wide receiver at your wide receiver 2? I'll get back to the results on that in a second. And then that led me to think about it, like actually statistically what's happening. I'm going to be completely honest. When I actually looked up the stat, I expected it to be the opposite of what I ended up finding. So what I found was when Gabriel Davis plays more than 70% of snaps, the Bills average 32.4 per game, which is a pretty big number. When he plays less than 70% of snaps, they average 28.4. So it's a 4-point difference, which is actually a fairly important number, right? Talking about more than a field goal difference. Just to kind of clarify here, though, that there was only 6 games where Davis played over 70% of the snaps. Then you go to Dawson Knox. When he plays more than 70% of the Bills, also average 34 points per game, surprisingly. But when he played under 70% of snaps, the Bills averaged just 16 points. So you're talking a difference of 16.4 points, which is humongous. That was in 3 games. It was 3 of the Bills' 5 lowest scoring games. It was Pittsburgh, the first game of the season, the second game against Miami, where they scored 26, and then the Jacksonville game. I guess one thing to kind of throw out there on this, just to give a little bit more context to those numbers, the one thing I want to make sure people remember is Davis was essentially replacing Emmanuel Sanders as that wide receiver 2 when his snap count went up. Dawson Knox was replaced by Tommy Sweeney. So the drop off in talent between the two, like Knox and Sweeney, are vastly different in talent level. Davis and Sanders are much closer. All that comes to the last part of this, which was that tweet I put out, the poll. The poll was split 50-50 just about. So 366 people said that they wanted the top 6 tight end as their tight end 1, and 369 people said they wanted a top 20 wide receiver at wide receiver 2. This is such like we never had this issue as Bills fans, basically my entire life, or my entire cognizant life. We have all of this talent. Our biggest fear is losing the talent because we have too much of it. But it is kind of crazy to look at it and say, without Dawson Knox, we're talking about a 16.4 point difference. And obviously there's other factors that played into that, but it's still a pretty massive number to look at.
Yeah. I don't know what you're talking about, Hansel, because I remember back in the day, we were having the same exact conversation over Donald Jones and Scott Chandler. I don't know what you're talking about. All jokes aside, though, even the games where Knox missed, like due to injury, I felt like the offense was super clunky and out of a rhythm when he broke his hand and missed that time. Obviously, there is a massive talent disparity between him and Tommy Sweeney, or him and Cahal Waring, who also stepped in. But Hansel, in your opinion, like, who's more important to the Bills' 2022 offense? Is it Gabriel Davis emerging alpha wide receiver 2, or is it Dawson Knox continuing to be a sturdy tight end number 1? What's the more important factor to the Bills' success in 2022?
So I'm kind of going to go back to a point I had, like the disparity in talent between their backups. The disparity between Dawson Knox and OJ Howard. I mean, Dawson's clearly better than OJ Howard, even though Mike Florio thinks that that's a competition, which is a whole nother story to talk about. And then there's Gabriel Davis as your outside wide receiver 2, who's like the backup outside wide receiver. We have all these slot guys, all these small guys that can play inside, but there's no true like outside guy that could step in really for Gabe Davis, unless people want to start talking about and Isaiah Hodgins, a debate that drives me crazy every single offseason that I do not want to have again. So I'm going to, just because of that, if we lose Gabe Davis, we just lose so much size and so much talent on the edge. And I don't know where we kind of resolve that. If we lose Dawson Knox, knock on wood, at least you have OJ Howard, who is talented tight end, even though reports out of camp aren't great. And then I'm very intrigued by Jalen Weidermeyer. I don't know what he is. I'm very confused by him, but that's a guy I want to watch at camp. I'm excited about.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at it, Davis gives you that potential, I think, with all those targets that Emmanuel Sanders and Cole Beasley are giving up. He gives the Buffalo Bills a legit shot at recreating what Tampa Bay has in that Chris Godwin and Mike Evans combo. But it's a tricky situation because at the same time, that Tampa Bay offense that we've seen the last couple of years is just as much 12 personnel using the tight ends, whether it's Gronk, Cameron Brate, OJ Howard, running the football, as they are spreading you out. It's their ability to be versatile. And you sort of lose that if you lose a guy like Dawson Knox. So, Dave, what are your thoughts entering 2022? Who needs to have the bigger year for the Bills to be successful? Gabriel Davis or Dawson Knox?
Oh man, that's a tough question. But I will say this: when we're talking about Hansen's poll, top 20 wide receiver 2 or top 6 tight end 1, the backstory behind both of those is very interesting, right? Because you have if you're voting for top 20 wide receiver 2, you're doing that knowing that you have a potential top 3, top 5 wide receiver 1 already. So you're like, okay, we got to think about that a little bit, right? It's not like, okay, my wide receiver 1's a top 20 and my wide receiver 2 is a top 20. Like, you have a legitimate top 5 receiver. And then the tight end purgatory I've spoken about many times on the show kind of probably weighs into some of that too. That Bills fans don't want to go back to that tight end purgatory that we've had. So I can see why the top tight end 6, like a top 6 tight end, is important to a lot of people. And that's why it's not surprising me the poll ended up 50-50, because I don't think there's a wrong answer to this question. I will say that I think it is more important for the Bills to be successful in 2022. I would say I think it's more important for Gabriel Davis to have a big year, just because to the point that has been made, right? Like, there's no other boundary guy. Like, Marcus Stevenson, is he going to play on the, like, who is the guy, right? If he goes out, like, you don't have anyone other than Stephon Diggs. If we still had Tommy Sweeney as the TE2, I would have said Dawson Knox. But I think because of that disparity now has kind of closed between, not necessarily saying that OJ Howard is as good as Dawson Knox, but like the Bills had kind of gone through several years, and even the first couple successful years with Josh Allen, where Dawson Knox wasn't necessarily as heavily involved as he was last year, and they were still very, very successful on offense. But they always had a good trio, or at least duo, wide receivers, right, between John Brown and Cole Beasley, Stephon Diggs, and Emmanuel Sanders, and then Gabriel Davis into the mix. So I feel like having those two really good receivers is really important to this Bills offense. And knowing that OJ Howard is there, I think that's why I kind of lean Gabriel Davis for this question.
We got Stephen Burns coming in. He says you can find receivers more easily than a top tight end, and that's
I don't disagree with that. But the question was, who is more important to the Bills' 2022 season?
And that's what brings me to my next question, which is, which of these two players, Dawson Knox or Gabriel Davis, is more important to the Buffalo Bills' future? Like, if it comes down to it, and you got to make the decision, we're either extending Dawson Knox or we're extending Gabriel Davis. Who are you giving a big money extension to, and who are you letting walk? Ryan, I'm going to start with you here. What do you think?
Well, so you pulled up the comment, I think it was Walter, that said Knox will come off the field time to time. And Knox actually played 100% of the snaps once or twice last year. In all the other games, he was 80 or 90. So Knox has played all the snaps before. So I think that's one thing. And that's why I'm going to lean Knox, because having a top tight end or having a top 6 tight end is a matchup problem. It forces teams to put out different personnel. It forces defense to align differently. If you have a top tight end, right, you either got to commit what is normally a smaller nickel corner to him on most teams. You got to put a linebacker on him who normally isn't as good in coverage, or you got to drop down a safety and you're playing one high defense, or you got to rotate someone back, or whatever it is. Having a really good tight end, having a top 6 tight end is a matchup problem for teams. You know, you can put him in line. As good as Gabe Davis is, he's not going to change the ways teams line up unless all of a sudden they start running a bunch of zero personnel or a bunch of, play a ton of spread, which they only really did in that Steelers game last year, which is the only game that Knox wasn't hurt in, that he didn't play a bunch of snaps. So having a really good tight end just stresses defense in different ways. And I think with how good Stephon Diggs is, he opens up so many things for the rest of the teams. And we talk about Gabe Davis. Like, I love Gabe Davis. If the Bills win that game, that goes down as in the history books, is probably one of the best playoff performances in NFL history, the game he had against Kansas City. But because they lost, we don't talk about it as much. But let's not forget that he put up less yards in his second year than he did his first year. You know, he had to fight to get his snaps back with Emmanuel Sanders. So he's, for all the hype, this is going to come off me as being a hater. I'm not a Gabe Davis hater. I hope he comes in and has 1,000-yard season and everything. But he's not going to stress. He does not stress teams in the way, if Dawson Knox continues to develop, can stress teams.
Matt 716 comes in. He says Gabriel Davis. Spin 0481. He says Dawson Knox. Hansel, what do you say in this Knox Davis beyond 2022 debate? Who would be the one that you would extend?
It's difficult, right? And I think both sides have reasonable arguments for why they'd pick Knox or Davis. I have seen, watching Gabe Davis play football when he's peaked. He's super special. The way he can catch balls on the sideline, it's just incredible. And he's made so many games in that what was it in the Chiefs game? I think when he basically bowled through a guy on 4th down, like people forget about that play. I don't remember if it was the Chiefs or the Bucks or which game it was, but people forget about that. His against the Colts in the playoff 2020. I say all this to say, I've seen these peaks and these big flashes of talent from Gabe Davis, even with significantly less playing time than Knox. And that's not to say Knox is bad or he's not good. I think he's a top 10 tight end right now, and I think he can get as high as 6 this year. But I think a lot of the plays Knox made, and he made some great plays. That catch against the Patriots in the playoffs was incredible. But then there were some other ones where he was just wide open and he just ran, through everybody. I got to lean Davis just because I think there's a very special talent there where I don't know if Knox can ever be a George Kittle or a Rob Gronkowski. Like, I don't see that arc for Knox. Again, I think Knox is incredible. I'm so happy we actually have a good tight end. I just think there's something special with Davis. Granted, I need to see more. Ryan's right. Like, we haven't seen enough to be all in on him. Like, this is his year. Like, he's got to prove it this year. Knox has at least somewhat proven it last year.
Can I throw a stat out there? Because I see I see the chat. I see some people saying Knox has trouble catching compared to Davis. Dawson Knox has a higher career catch rate than Dawson Knox has a higher career catch rate than Gabe Davis. Dawson Knox is 61% for his career. Gabe Davis is 56%, I think. So I just want to throw that out there for the Dawson Knox is worse at catching.
But how many of those were in big moments?
Fair.
No, I'm just kidding.
Well, just real quick, if Davis catches that ball against the Jaguars, the Bills don't lose that game at the end of the Jaguars game. So Davis has had his issues in crunch time too. It's just, I think we all remember that Chiefs game, and that was just incredible to watch. So,
Dave, where do you land on this Gabriel Davis, Dawson Knox, future beyond 2022 debate?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, look, Gabriel Davis, he hasn't cleared 600 yards yet in either of his 2 seasons. And I know that's, because he hasn't been the focal point necessarily, but he's had, a lot of touchdowns. I think a lot of fans remember that Chiefs game, and that's what they envision in their minds is what they want Gabriel Davis to be all season long. And rightfully so, right? He's shown the ability to do that in moments. And I'm guilty of it as well, right? I think about that Chiefs game, the 4 touchdowns, and I think, wow, man, like this guy, he is special. But I also try to ground myself a little bit and say, like, that was one game that we remember because it was the last game he played and how good he was. And he still has a lot to prove as well. Dawson Knox battled through his hands issues and came out with a really strong season last year. I think both guys have a lot to prove in 2022. They both have had very good moments in their seasons with the Bills so far, but I don't think either one has necessarily made the case strongly enough over the other to where you can have a wrong answer to this question. For me, I look at teams like the Chiefs who have had Travis Kelce for a long time and have created those mismatch nightmares. The Niners were in the Super Bowl with George Kittle, obviously Tampa Bay in the Super Bowl with Gronk. And to me, I don't want to go back to that tight end purgatory that the Bills were in for as long as they were. It's not like the Bills went from, I don't even know, right? Like, who's a team that had a good tight end and then had another one fall? Like, I don't even know, right? Like, the Bills just haven't had somebody like that ever, really, like in the last 20 years. Like, Scott Chandler, I love him, he's a great guy, but he's not Dawson Knox, right? Charles Clay was, by most accounts, a swing and a miss, right, on a big free agent contract. Like, he had his moments too, but he never lived up to that contract. So the Bills finally maybe have a gem here in Dawson Knox, who could be a top 5 tight end. And so that's why I would lean Knox, but honestly, I don't think there's a wrong answer.
Yeah, it's random. Cam comes up with a great comment too. He'd go with Knox because he likes the idea that, or he thinks that wide receivers will come to Buffalo at a discount just to play with a guy like Josh Allen. So maybe a guy looking to rebound, etc. Reboost his statistics on a short-term deal in order to get paid again, might come and play for a guy like Josh Allen. I'm always going to be, and I throw this out here every show, like I cheat. I'm team just pay all the offensive players and let Sean McDermott figure out the defense. Like, that's me. Give me Dawson Knox. Give me Gabriel Davis. Sign them both long-term. Sean McDermott, you're a so-called defensive guru. You were a defensive coordinator your whole career. Say goodbye to Tremaine Edmonds. Say goodbye to Jordan Poyer. at Oliver, we can have another conversation, because if he shows his potential this season, I think that's a different conversation. But we have like first round picks at almost every part of our defense. We've allocated high monetary resources to every level of our defense. At some point, Sean McDermott, if you're such a great defensive coach, Leslie Frazier, if you're such a great defensive coach, make it work with Preston Brown again. Like, you know what I mean? Like that type of player. Have that caliber of player at some part of your defense and make it work with those caliber of players. The last thing I want is a Green Bay Packers situation where, Josh Allen, gets out of a rhythm with his receivers, or gets mad at the Buffalo Bills for not giving enough weapons because he feels like, well, we could get through the regular season, but when we got to the postseason, I just didn't have the ammunition I needed. All of those different things, because I feel like those are the talking points for Aaron Rodgers year after year. I just don't want to get to that situation with our QB1. So I'm cheating, but I get to go last. So that's why I get to cheat. Different perspective. So that's my take. Pay all the offensive players and just make it work on defense, John. And then if it doesn't work, we can just blame you. Not me, Sean McDermott. All right. So the next segment sort of inspired a little bit here from a photograph that the Buffalo Bills released of Visor Josh Allen, looking like an absolute boss. I know I was on Twitter. I said, is that Josh Allen or is that the Mandalorian? I think, Hanzo, you made a similar tweet today comparing NFL players to Star Wars characters. Go follow him on Twitter at UberHansen. It was a hilarious thread there. You had Brother Bill a couple of weeks ago comparing Josh Allen to 11 from Stranger Things, and he had a really nice thread comparing Buffalo Bills players to Stranger Things characters. So if you're a fan of Stranger Things, head on over to Brother Bill 716. Check out that thread. It was hilarious. And back before, we've done this on this show, Dave, one of your first ever edits was Josh Allen in sort of a Captain America type of role here. So let's have a little fun with this. And people in the comment section, let us know as well. What TV, movie, or book character is Josh Allen? And Dave, I'll start with you because you got the edits here. So I kind of feel like I know where you're going.
Let's put it up. So I did this. I was inspired. I'm a big Marvel movie fan. Not as big as a lot of people. Bruce exclusive is Bruce Nolan's a big Marvel guy. There's a lot of Marvel fans out there. Dell is a big Marvel guy. I know Pat Moran's trying to get into it too, but I'm a big Marvel fan, and I got inspired a little bit last summer. I was, for those who kind of follow me on Twitter, I do like to do a little bit of photo editing, and I wanted to do something with Josh Allen. I saw a lot of people kind of comparing him to Captain America, and I was like, okay, that's cool, like red, white, and blue. But I was like, you know what? The big three Avengers, right? Thor, Iron Man, and Captain America. Let's try to get all of the best elements of those guys into one kind of combination for Josh Allen. So you see them in the background there, all three of them, the big three Avengers. You got the shield, the Captain America shield, the Thor lightning eyes. You got the Iron Man, repulsor cannon. So he's got the cannon arm. He's got the vibranium shield, and then he's got that electric ability. So for me, it's a combination of the big three guys from the Marvel universe: Thor, Captain America, Iron Man. He's the best of all of them combined. And I was really happy with how this turned out. And so that's what immediately came to mind for me when I thought about Josh Allen.
Ryan, how about you? What'd you come up with for what character is Josh Allen?
I'm really bad at this stuff with the TV shows and movie comps. I was really going through it. And the only thing I could think, because I was trying to think of someone who was a little crazy and a little goofy, but also really strong and good at his job. And I've only watched a couple of the TV shows, but I watched the movie A-Team with, I watched the Bradley Cooper version of it. And then I went back and I watched a couple of the shows. And the helicopter guy, Murdoch, the really crazy guy, because Josh is really good at his job, but admittedly, by the players, look at what Dawson Knox said about him with the D's nuts jokes. He's a little like what was that he said before the Taiwan Jones said before the Patriots game? I choose violence. Who's with me? he's not totally like all there sometimes. So like he's a little crazy, and sometimes he decides he doesn't care about his safety and he's gonna go out and he's gonna do what he has to do to make plays. And if you watch the I like the Bradley Cooper version of it, honestly, of A-Team, or if you go back and watch, I don't even know when the TV show was on, but Murdoch from A-Team, I think that's it. He's really good at his job. He's a little crazy. Sometimes he's gonna put himself at risk and maybe even put people around him at risk. But at the end of the day, he's really good at his job, and he's going to get his job done.
We got John Osborne coming in saying Star-Lord.
He looks like Chris Pratt. Let's be real. Like Josh Allen and Chris Pratt. Like Chris Pratt will play Josh Allen in like some movie like down the road.
Stephen Burns comes in and says, I had no idea Rich Eisen calls Josh the Mandalorian. So he says that's the one and that is the way. Based on what you posted on Twitter today, Hansel, I think that might be where you're going with this. Jason Taylor says the Terminator. Dustin Lyons says the Abominable Throwman. I like that one a lot. Hansel, what'd you come up with here for Josh Allen as a character from either?
I mean, I like the Mandalorian. I think that's and especially with a picture they posted. Oh my god, that made me feel things I will. But I'm actually going to go here. I always word supernova with Josh. When he gets in a mode where he's like, I got to win this game or I have to do something crazy, I call it supernova. Like he just starts doing things that I've never seen done. Or kind of going off that. I'm not an expert in this show by any means. I'm going Goku from Dragon Ball Z, who goes Super Saiyan. So I just think that fits. I've seen a lot of edits too of Josh Allen like going Super Saiyan, and I love it. Allen does when he like turns it on, goes force. I just don't think it's. And I think it fits Goku from Dragon Ball Z.
There we got a good one. Pops Mafia, low blow here. He says Josh is Superman, and his kryptonite in the playoffs is a coin flip. Ouch, ouch. We had to go there, Pops Mafia. Ryan, you mentioned this earlier. You talked about Josh Allen, that Dawson Knox interview this week where they're like, Dawson, what's Josh like, just around the clubhouse, when you're not at practice, what's he like? And he talked about D's nuts jokes. And Dawson Knox is like, Josh, every day it's a new D's nuts joke. So to me, I'm going with Deadpool, right? Because you got this mercenary assassin taking out opponent after opponent while dropping D's nuts jokes. And let's face it, he's been dropping D's nuts all over the AFC East for 2 years now, and he'll be dropping D's nuts over all of the opponents that he faces in 2022. So I'm going with Deadpool.
I like that.
Based strictly on the D's nuts jokes. My runner-up was, have you guys ever seen that movie with Vince Vaughn where like he's a sperm donor and gets like 1 million women pregnant, like something like that? He's got like 40 kids. That would be my second one because Josh Allen is just as cool as Vince Vaughn, and he's got children all over the AFC East. He's everybody's daddy. The Patriots were wishing him Happy Father's Day. The Jets were wishing him Happy Father's Day. The Dolphins were wishing him Happy Father's Day. So Josh Allen's got kids all over the AFC East. So maybe Vince Vaughn. There's also a Netflix documentary, I think, that's a little bit more problematic than a Vince Vaughn film about somebody who did something similar. But staying in the vein of Josh Allen, I saw a really interesting statistic from Brett Coleman the other day. It was last week I saw a tweet from Brett Coleman. The Bills ran 74% of their offensive plays last year out of the shotgun. They have a new offensive line coach this year in Aaron Cromer. They've added O.J. Howard. They've added Roger Saffold. Are we going to see over or under 70% of the Bills' offensive plays run out of the shotgun in 2022? In other words, is 7 out of every 10 plays going to be out of the shotgun, more or less? Hansel, what do you think here?
More space, a little extra time, scam that. So I'm going to go over for two main reasons with this team. I don't think they have like a power runner where they can put Josh. He can hand the ball off, and that's going to change much. So with that in mind, I don't really see the the value of putting him under center. I guess you get the play action benefit to that. But then outside of that, I like the idea of Josh and shotgun with James Cook right next to him. I think that could be a really deadly formation for the Bills. James Cook kind of, go out for a quick screen or maybe even put him in motion, get him on the edge and get that mismatch. I think that I'm going to go over. I just think Allen is in my head better out of the shotgun. Again, don't have the stats to back that up.
Ryan, what do you think? Over under 70% of Josh Allen snaps coming out of the shotgun this year.
You look back at some of Josh's comments, right? I don't run what I don't like, whatever it was that he said last year when they were installing the offense. And I think Dorsey is a smart enough guy to not fix what's not to fix what isn't broken. And I don't think the being in shotgun was necessarily an issue, or the amount of shotgun was the issue with. Again, I think the outlier is that first Pittsburgh game where they decided to go 0 personnel more than any other team in the league that week. But I think they're really going to not fix what's broken. I think it'll come back towards 70% with some of the stuff that Cromer likes to do in the run game. But if Josh's fingerprints are still on this offense, like we assume it was last year, you'd imagine, unless it stops working or teams figure it out, it's going to be right around that same number in my projection.
Dave, how about you? Over under 70% of the snaps next year out of the shotgun.
Yeah, so 2020 they were 72%, 2019 they were just under 60%. So you've seen that kind of increase up from 2019 and then into 2020 they were over 70. Last year they were over 70. Dorsey as a first-year OC, obviously Josh wanting to be comfortable. I don't see a ton of wholesale changes to the formation breakdown. Like maybe it's a little bit closer to the 70%, but I don't think you'll be under 70%. I do think Hansel made a great point. I think James Cook's probably going to be more comfortable in a shotgun situation too when he's getting his snaps as either a guy out of the backfield or even if he's coming out of the slot. I think Josh's going to want to be in the shotgun there for that. And I think that Devin Singletary and James Cook's running styles are better suited to run out of the shotgun as well. It just those types of backs, they're, Devin Singletary, I feel like he does a better job when he's got a chance to kind of stop and like look around, see where he wants to go. Whereas coming out of center, you're pretty much got your momentum all going one way. I don't know. Like Eric could probably prove this out on some tape, right? Devin Singletary runs out of shotgun versus not, but it just feels to me like those two guys would be more successful running the ball as well out of the shotgun. So I don't see it being under 70. I'll take the over.
Yeah, I'm going to go with the over as well. I don't think we're going to see some major swing away from what Josh Allen has been comfortable with. And as you just mentioned, you just laid out, it's been, borderline 70% or above for the last, 2 seasons. We chased J.D. McKissick, who's that third down scat back, and then we drafted James Cook in the second round. A lot of our receivers outside of the top 2 are slot and gadget guys. We can still spread teams out with the running backs that we have. O.J. Howard, Dawson, Knox can both be utilized. They don't have to be at the line of scrimmage in order for them to be successful. You can bunch them. You can create mismatches out of the shotgun. And when you do make that conscious decision to go into 12 personnel or into I formation, chances are the defense is probably going to think you're wanting to run the ball, and that way you can utilize that play action to success. But if you overutilize it, then you might not be able to utilize it to the success that you would if you bring it out on those special occasions, 30% or so of the time. All right. This next segment here, sort of inspired by something that I heard here in local Arizona sports radio. Right now in mandatory minicamp, they had a player who skipped mandatory minicamp that they were not expecting to skip here in Arizona, and that was center Rodney Hudson. And they were having a conversation on the radio like, man, last year when Rodney Hudson went down, we brought out everybody and auditioned everybody at center, and it didn't go well. Now we have our right guard, Justin Pugh, lining up at center at mandatory OTAs. Oh my God, what are we going to do? Rodney Hudson is the most irreplaceable player in this offense outside of Kyler Murray. And a lot of that has to do with who his backup is. So my question to you guys here is, outside of Josh Allen in 2022, who is the most irreplaceable player on the Buffalo Bills roster? Meaning, if this player gets hurt, there's really maybe not much behind him on the roster who can even come close to replicating that player's production. Ryan, what do you think here?
So I kind of wanted to go off the beaten path because I figured someone might take, a bigger name person. And the fact you went center is interesting. That it was Rodney Hunt is interesting because I said Mitch Morse, because I think you look at the call, what is on Mitch Morse, him as a weapon in the run game, him, as part of the he's part of the brains of the passing game, calling out assignments, calling out protections, all that stuff. Having a smart center like Mitch Morse is hugely important. And I really think center is one of the most undervalued positions in football, and it shocks me that it's as low paid as it is compared to other positions on the line, because you've seen what, you just talked about it with Arizona, what they were without Rodney Hudson. And I really think Mitch Morse is absolutely invaluable on that offensive line, and invaluable to Josh Allen.
Yeah, that's an interesting one as well. Thinking like off the top of my head, like what happens if Mitch Morse is out? You're now all of a sudden playing musical chairs. Ryan Bates kicks inside. You probably move David Questenberry to right guard. It's that moving multiple players to fill one spot, something that sort of bit the Buffalo Bills a little bit last year. So Mitch Morse is a good one. Dave, what do you got here? Most irreplaceable player on the Buffalo Bills outside of Josh Allen?
This is tough, man, because my brain kind of wants to say Deion Dawkins, but I'm not going to. I'm going to say Stephon Diggs. And the reason I say that is because that's 300 targets over the last 2 seasons. It's the alpha wide receiver you traded to come in to be Josh's main guy. We talked a lot about Gabriel Davis. I get that. He's a rising star, at least in our minds as Bills fans, but you can't replace Stephon Diggs. You can't replace a top 3, top 5 wide receiver with anybody on this Bills roster. And it will have a trickle down effect on the rest of the offense. There is a aura and a mentality and a presence that he brings onto the field that no one else in that wide receiver room, or really on the offensive side of the ball other than Josh Allen, is bringing to the game, right? Gabriel Davis maybe has it in him, but he's not going to bring that same mentality and that same presence that Stephon Diggs brings every week, that reliability, that taking the hit. He's taken so many shots on catches over the last couple of years with the Bills, and the dude is just an absolute monster. So for me, it's Diggs, and I'll give Dawson, not Dawson Knox, Deion Dawkins a honorable mention.
How about you? What is the most irreplaceable Bill outside of Josh Allen? Oh, yeah, I'm mute there.
Sorry, I was drinking my water. I didn't want to hear you do some weird thing where you can hear me drinking. Anyway, Deion Dawkins is also if Evans is not on the field, do not put Josh Allen on the field with Bobby Harp. I scream this rooftops every chance I get. I underrated by Bills in the NFL. I think he's the entire key to the Bills defense. There's countless examples of actually adjusting coverage schemes. We just saw him make up for blown coverage by Levi Wallace and picking off Jones in that playoff game. I think my eye goes down, the Bills and starts to kind of collapse on that back end. He just makes up for so many abilities. And I really trust Darhan, Jaquanton, or even Siren Neal to fill that high intelligent spot at pace. That's not me saying DeMar or Jaquan or Saran are stupid. It's just the experience brings to that role, the trust that the team. And on top of one last point on Micah Hyde, he's going to return punts at some point this year. I'm 100% of that. And the reason he returns punts is because we can trust him to return punts. And that's just another why I think if we lose him, we're in big trouble.
Yeah, Micah Hyde, Deion Dawkins, those are all important ones as well. To me, I went with the easy one there because I originally went with Deion Dawkins, but Hansel, you went with Deion Dawkins there. So I'm gonna go with the duh one, and that's Von Miller. I think that Von Miller, there's really no other proven pass rusher on this football team. So you lose Von Miller, you're losing that proven pass rush threat. Not to mention, I think Von Miller is going to take pressure off of a lot of those younger guys as well. So I would go with Von Miller in terms of most irreplaceable player on the Bills roster outside of Josh Allen. They paid that man for a reason. But that brings me to my next question here. And that question is, who is the second most important player on the Bills roster outside of Josh Allen? Most important is different from most or least irreplaceable in that this isn't about, well, if this player gets hurt, we lose out on their presence on the field. And this is sort of what is the second player on this football team outside of Josh Allen who, when they're on the field, puts this football team over the top. They're that second X factor player that really makes the Buffalo Bills a cut above some of the opponents that they are playing. That second alpha outside of Josh Allen. So who would you go with here, Dave? I'll start with you.
Well, I'm going kind of like the opposite of what, not the opposite, but like I picked Von Miller for this one, right? So to me, Stephon Diggs is the most irreplaceable. Von Miller may be the second most important for the reasons that we need in crunch time, right? We need him to close out games. We need him to bring the quarterback down. We need him to put the nail in the coffin in these playoff games, right? And I think that that's Von Miller. Stephon Diggs may be the most irreplaceable player, but Von Miller may be the most important player outside of Josh Allen for the Bills to close out what they really want to do this year, and that's win a championship. Mm-hmm. Did it in the Super Bowl last year, did it in the Super Bowl with the Broncos, done it in multiple playoff games. So to me, like you said, you paid this man all this money. He's got to come in and be that second most important guy, aka your most important player on the defense, whereas Josh Allen's your most important player on the offense. So to me, Von Miller isn't in the category of being the most irreplaceable because the Bills have obviously went deep in the playoffs without him, but he is the guy that I feel like maybe can push them over the top when it comes into these late game situations to just seal the deal. And so for that reason is why I said Von Miller is the second most important player.
Hansel, how about you? Who do you think is the second most important player to the Buffalo Bills outside of obviously Josh Allen?
So my approach to this was who needs well for the Bills to win a Super Bowl, or who needs to kind of improve, step up, take it to the about that. So I need Edmonds to just simply play better. And I can't see no matter what with all these other with Josh Allen playing at a free. If the center sitting, if there's a hole there, the Bills aren't going there. So I'm going Tremaine Edmonds and hoping and praying.
Yeah, it seems like we might be losing a little bit of a connection with you there, Hansel. So you might want to maybe try to reset. But Hansel said Tremaine Edmonds there. That's who he went with. Spin 0481 came in as well. It says Edmonds was a shot caller on that number one defense last year. So that's another player with, hey, we've added Von Miller. We've had a whole bunch of beef along that defensive line. If we want to take this defense to the next level, Tremaine, your physical attributes need to match sort of all the talent around you. Even if you might not be the most instinctual player, we've now put an environment around you where you can wreak havoc like an instinctual player because of all that talent around you. So you need to maximize your physical gifts there. So really like that one, that pick of Tremaine Edmonds there. Ryan, what did you go with? What did you go with there for your pick? Second most important Bills player.
So I want to say that I absolutely agree that Edmonds and Von Miller are probably more important than this, but I wanted to kind of go once again off the path because I figured some of the more, like you said, maybe some of the more dub ones would be taken. So I kind of want to go off the beaten path, go a little niche with it. So I went with a guy who was 5th in the NFL among edge defenders against the rush last year, and that was Greg Rousseau. Playing the, I know running the football seems to be becoming less and less important, but so much of playing good defense is keeping teams behind the sticks, keeping your defense in advantageous situations. And having a guy who came in as a rookie who hadn't played football the year before and hadn't and only played the position for really a year competitively in Greg Rousseau, for him to come in and play as well as he did was massive. And I think he has to come in, not only play as well as that, but play better for this line to really step up, right? We talk about, Von Miller coming in, teaching all that stuff. And if Greg Rousseau can take that step, because Von Miller, if nothing else, because Von Miller is chasing guys, what was Greg Rousseau? Greg Rousseau, one of his things, people say, well, he had a lot of cleanup sacks. He's going to have a lot of opportunities for cleanup sacks with Von Miller pressuring and chasing quarterbacks around. So he's a guy that if he steps up and he takes the next step as a second-year player, as what is probably only his 3rd or 4th season playing defensive end, playing edge rusher in football, if he can do that, it's going to be massive. It's going to be massively important for him to come in and continue that development, because after him, Boogie Basham had trouble. I know you caught some heat when you threw him in with some of the other guys who had disappointed last year, but he's a guy who couldn't be active for 16 games. AJ Epinesa has not been able to be active for 16 games. Yet after Greg Rousseau, the cliff there is actually kind of massive, because we don't know what anyone else is on that line. So a little off the beaten path. There's probably guys who might be better, but going niche, I think Greg Rousseau's development is going to be massively important to this team next year or this year.
We got Charles G coming in and says, hey, can Hyde and Poyer both be an answer? I mean, practically the two of them are one player because they're so in sync at this point. And I think you can really make a push for sort of a tie for second between Hyde and Poyer. The addition of Von Miller, like Dave mentioned, hopefully the front seven has gotten beefier, more aggressive, wreaks more havoc on the quarterback. That's going to possibly open up a lot of opportunities for the secondary if the quarterbacks make unwise decision under said pressure. Can guys like Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde be making game-breaking plays, more game-breaking plays than probably they already have, simply because there's more opportunities to do so? So Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer could be one. I'm going to go with Ed Oliver here. And I feel like Ed Oliver, you could feed off his talent as an interior rusher, and he can bring something as an interior rusher that just sets this defense apart. You look at some teams that have success in the postseason or some defenses that have success in general. I'm thinking of Tennessee with Jeffrey Simmons. I'm thinking of Los Angeles with Aaron Donald. That just difference that an interior pass rush brings to your defense and the headaches that it gives to quarterbacks. Now, Jeffrey Simmons and Aaron Donald are so talented that they can do it pretty much. It doesn't matter what their environment is. They create the havoc themselves. I don't know if because of his size, Ed Oliver is capable of creating that havoc on his own. But when you have Von Miller on the outside, when you have as good of a defense and an environment around him, a two-gapper and Daquan Jones, it opens up more one-on-one opportunities for Ed Oliver. You could see Ed Oliver creating those difference-making plays from the interior of the defense because of all that talent around him and because he's getting those ISOs. So I'm going to go with Ed Oliver here as a guy who could really make some game-changing plays for the Buffalo Bills this season. I know it's kind of a cop-out because, he's making those plays because of everyone else around him. But those plays, I think, might be so vital that what he contributes there is not something that an inferior player to him could create. And those are some really important plays. And Doug Masters comes in too. I just have sky-high expectations for Ed Oliver this year. He does as well. I think with a guy like Von Miller, with a guy like Daquan Jones, the Bills are really setting Ed Oliver up to have a very, very, very successful season. All right. Final topic of the evening, and then we can get to a couple of miscellaneous topics if anyone else has any topics they want to throw out there. But I want to have a little bit of fun with this last topic here. Are we as Buffalo Bills fans too mean to Mac Jones and Tua Tagovailoa? Because I see this all over social media. If you're on Twitter on a daily basis, there's some Nate Geary tweet triggering Dolphins fans. There are fans getting upset with Dolphins fans saying this or applauding this about Tua. There are Patriots fans and Bills fans bickering back and forth at one another. I understand that currently the Buffalo Bills have the high ground. We have won the AFC East twice the last 2 seasons. We have pretty much owned our opponents, minus a couple of games here and there in the AFC East over the last 2 seasons. But there's no denying that a team like the Dolphins have gotten significantly better this offseason with additions like Tyreek Hill. Are we as Bills fans being too mean to Mac Jones and to Tagovailoa? Hansel, you're someone noted for being not nice to our not nice in a funny way, like in a like I'm gonna diss you, but it's so funny that you really can't get mad at me type of way on social media. So I'm gonna let you test your broadband and answer this question. What do you mean to these guys here?
Yeah, can you hear me all right?
Yeah, we're good now.
Okay, good. Because I had to come back for this at least. No, we're not too mean. Hell no, we're not too mean. And the Patriots and Dolphins fans brought this onto themselves. Last year, Patriots fans were literally comparing Mac Jones to Tom Brady and at points saying he was better than Tom Brady. If you're going to do that and he doesn't perform like Tom Brady, no, you've opened yourself up to him being called a bag of milk or having a noodle arm. As far as Tua goes, same thing from Dolphins fans. Dolphins fans are acting like they act like Josh Allen was horrendous his second year in the NFL. He wasn't good. He wasn't horrendous. Tua's never really flashed anything. And it came to a head when Nate Geary actually tweeted something out like there's this weird PR campaign going on with the Dolphins. And then Tua's actual trainer on Twitter went after Geary, called Geary, I think like fat at one point or something. So the Dolphins fans and the Patriots fans have opened them up to this. For anybody that follows me, you'll see me needling them all the time. I just post silly stats. The most recent one was Micah Hyde has the same number of kick return touchdowns against the Dolphins as Tua has passing touchdowns against the Bills. Tua has one more passing touchdown against the Bills than Nate Peterman has against the Bills. So like the Dolphins and Patriots fans brought this onto themselves, and I'm more than happy to oblige that bringing onto themselves.
Ryan, how about you? You think that we're too mean to Patriots fans and Dolphins fans specifically?
I think the hate to quality ratio is a little off. I don't think Mac and Tua are as bad as some of the attention they've drawn from Bills fans. But you know, I've done the thing where I try to convince myself that I look at old stats of quarterbacks. I did it with EJ Manuel. It's like, look, Drew Brees had 2 bad years, so did EJ Manuel. But you know, they haven't been as bad as we make it out to be. I kind of came up with a rule. I think if they want to hype up their own and be happy, whatever, let them do their own thing in their corner and jerk each other off or whatever they're doing over there. But if they start doing the like Hansel said, if they start doing the posting Josh Allen's first 2-year stats and say, look, we can do that, just hit him with the Bill Barnwell tweet, my quarterback had whatever. I think it's my quarterback had 2 bad years. You know, what do we have here? Another Josh Allen. Like if they start doing that, hit him with the Bill Barnwell tweet and then move on. I think they draw a little bit too much attention. It's funny because we do have the high ground, especially on the Dolphins. But no, I think overall, no, it's not too mean. I think it's all for the most part in good fun. And I will say that Tuanon, the guy who does those Tuanon videos, is pretty funny.
And I'll say this too for Patriots fans. It's June 19th. It is June 19th. You haven't named an offensive coordinator yet. Like, you should be making fun of yourselves right now. Like, it shouldn't even be the Bills fans who need to make fun of you. You should be just owning yourself at this point and trying to hold your team accountable. as opposed to thinking like Mac Jones is going to have some career year or start to turn into Tom Brady when Matt Patricia or Joe Judge are the ones calling plays. And I was going to give the Jets fans like a pass in this segment because like they've been legitimately like they've been quiet. They're like, yeah, we have no leg to stand on. We're just going to sit back in the shadows. We're going to wait until there's some ounce of hope before we come out of the shadows and starts talking our smack. And then one random Jets fan yesterday decides to Photoshop a photo of Zach Wilson as the father of Josh Allen, Tua Tagovailoa, and Mac Jones. I guess the best comeback to that I saw was, at least you know Zach Wilson never beat his kids because he's never beat any of them. But Dave, what do you think about the Buffalo Bills maybe being too mean to some of our AFC East running mates here?
I mean, this is a lot of built up over the years coming out, right? Like this has been something we've been waiting for as Bills fans. We've been waiting for Tom Brady to get out of the Patriots organization forever. The Tua thing, I think it's just a daily funny thing between Nate and the Dolphins fans. But I do think there is some element there that there is a chance they could be good this year, right? And like there is a chance they could beat the Bills this year. I don't think it's a high chance, but like I know Bills fans are super passionate. We're all very passionate, but we're not really going to be the type to take the high road in this situation. We've been waiting for so long to be this good and have this type of quarterback, right? We've been dreaming of this day, not necessarily to like make fun of specifically Tua and Mac Jones, but to just really be like puffing our chests about the AFC East, right? That's really what this is about. I think bigger picture, that's what all of this is about, right? It's us being now the team with the quarterback and the premier team in the division. I don't think it really matters what the quarterback is on these other teams, Mac Jones to it. It's like the Bills were for all those years where we're like, oh, well, we got Drew Bledsoe, we might be able to make the playoffs this year. Or we got, Ryan Fitzpatrick. Like, I love him, but like, we're going to make the playoffs. No, like it has that kind of feel to me. Tua and Mac Jones could be very okay quarterbacks. They could end up even being above average quarterbacks, but I don't think you can objectively look at either one of those guys and put them even projection wise in the same tier as a Josh Allen. There's just the physical tools and ceiling is just not there for either of those guys. And so I think one person said in the comment section, Zach Wilson, arm talent wise, and maybe just like physical skills wise, has probably got a higher ceiling than either Mac or Tua, to be honest. But yeah, I mean, this is just years of built up, suppressing biting our lip and like having to deal with the Pats and kudos to a lot of the Jets fans, right? Because the Jets have been mired in worse situation than the Bills for the better part of the last 2 decades as well. Outside of those 2 AFC championship runs they went on with Mark Sanchez, the Jets have been god awful for 15, 20 years. And the Dolphins have kind of like been average, right? So I don't get too hung up on it on social media. That's just not what I do because I'm just not, I don't do it, but I also understand why Bills fans do it. It totally makes sense to me and I get it.
And that sort of brings me to my next point too, because my next question is sort of like, were we this bad during the drought era? Because I have this really wonderful app on Twitter called Tweet Delete, where after 3 months, all of my tweets just delete. So there's just so if you want to get me, you got a screenshot and save that.
Do it now.
And remember to go and utilize. It's a wonderful tool. I highly suggest it to all of you hot take artists out there like me. Tweet Delete. It is a wonderful, wonderful app. But one app that doesn't have a delete feature is Facebook. And I've been highly active on Facebook since like, I don't know, as a sophomore in high school. I don't want to talk about some of that, but man, some cringe-worthy Facebook memories pop up on a daily basis in the month of June and July for me. I mean, we're talking like Buffalo Bills 4-0 heading to the desert. Ironically, I now live here in Arizona. Trent Edwards is the next Carson Palmer. Nope, concussion, career over. Bills suck. Cringeworthy EJ Manuel Facebook posts, like just absolute denial. And then Tyrod, don't even get me started on Tyrod. I was pretty much referring to him as Ty God on a semi-regular basis for a good 2 years there. So were we, like, if we're really honestly reflecting, were we this bad during the drought era? Ryan, what do you think?
Oh, absolutely. 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 Are you kidding me? Like I said, I talked myself into so many quarterbacks. Like I said, I did let's look at EJ Manuel's first year stats compared to Drew Brees' first stats. Oh, look at that. That's wonderful. EJ's going to be great. I talked myself into so many teams being playoff teams. I talked myself into Chan being a really good coach. I talked myself into so much stuff. And, and I listened to, I grew up a Bills season ticket holder growing up from about 8th grade to my senior year. And I listened to all the WGR on the way there, all the WGR on the way back, 5 years of that. And yes, we were absolutely that bad. Now, I think when you have a bad team, you kind of split into two factions. You have the internal optimist bunch, which is what I was, and I'm still guilty of that. I'm always kind of optimistic. And you have the people who are always internally pessimistic. I remember calls about the team moving to LA. I remember calls about, so yes, we Bills fans were absolutely guilty during the drought of being overly optimistic about guys like you said it, Donald Jones, David Nelson. Look at this receiving group. We're so good. We're so deep,
baby.
So yeah, we were I think every team is. I think you go across sports, you see that stuff, right? You can go into stuff, right? Look at I'm not as in depth, I'm not deep in the Sabres Twitter, but I follow a lot of Sabres people, and I follow a lot of people who tweet about the Sabres, and I see all this stuff tweeting about, look at all this assets we have, and look at all these young players we have, and look, we're going to go on and we're going to make the playoffs. And I don't know if any of that, I don't know enough to evaluate hockey, whether those are accurate statements or people being overly optimistic, but I think that's the nature of sports, is you're always going to have people, especially if you're a really bad team, that are going to find ways to be really optimistic, even if there's not reasons to be very optimistic.
Yeah, Matt716 comes in and says, JP Loserman. The best way to summarize JP Lossman's only finger quotes good season for the Buffalo Bills, where he had like a decent stat line. It was like 16 or 18 touchdowns, like 7 picks. I don't know. That's just me going off the top of my head. But essentially, to summarize JP Lossman's season, he either completed an 80-yard bomb to Lee Evans, or threw it in completion and took a sack. Like, it was just a really good season because he hit a shit ton of bombs and didn't throw very many picks.
Lee Evans deserves so much better, man.
And I'm pretty sure we as Bills fans were just as confident as Dolphins fans are, in Tua. I still remember to this day, like, NFL.com, are the Buffalo Bills for real? And like a picture of Josh Reed flexing after he went like 4-0, and I don't think we won another game the rest of the goddamn season. So, Hansa, how about you? Like, were we this delusional during the drought era as Tuanon is? Let's use Tuanon specifically.
I talked myself into Jeff Toole, so I could talk myself into anybody. But saying that, I never talked myself into Jeff Toole to a point where I said Jeff Toole is going to be as good as Tom Brady. And that's the thing that's driving me nuts right now with Patriots fans and Dolphins fans, is they all are insisted that Mac Jones and Tua, they're going to be just as good as Josh Allen, if not better. Get the hell out of here with that. I know Bills fans were forever optimists. Like, there was a lot of them that thought we could win the Super Bowl with Ryan Fitzpatrick and that team we had that year with Fred Jackson. It wasn't going to happen, but I never saw somebody be like, oh, Ryan Fitzpatrick's better than Tom Brady. And I've been critical of Tom Brady at points, but I'm fully aware that I never once said that any of our quarterbacks were nearly as good as Tom Brady. So with that in mind, yeah, I think we were pretty bad at points, but not as bad as a lot of Pats and Dolphins fans are right now.
Dave, how about you? Were we as Bills fans during the drought era as bad as these? I'm going to leave the Jets out of this because it was just one guy on social media this season, but as going on and of the McCorkle fan club.
I mean, we were bad, but I think Hansel made a great point. We were never bad to the point where we thought any of these guys were Tom Brady. I don't think we were even as bad to the point as ever thinking we were going to like somehow be better than the Patriots even for a given season. I think there were a lot of points where we were like, oh, we're going to make the playoffs this year, because that was really like the number one thing during the drought era, that we wanted to do, right? Was just make the playoffs somehow, one way or another. And we had teams that we thought, I think, were good enough and probably should have been good enough to make the playoffs during that era, but it just never came together for various reasons, right? I mean, like, I remember distinctively after JP Lossman had that season where he had those touchdowns to Lee Evans, and obviously the Texans game, someone made reference to that. I distinctly remember a locker room interview he was doing in the training camp leading up to the next season. And he said the quote, something along the effects of like, Bills fans love the long ball. And it's the second he said that, I knew he was going to be shit that season. I just knew it. Like, I knew he was going to be shit that season, and he was. And it's just like those things. I'm like, man, don't say that. Just don't say that. And like, we said it all the time as Bills fans, like, oh yeah, like Bill, we love the long ball, JP to Lee, blah, blah, blah. And we went through so many iterations of that. And so, but I don't remember anyone being as delusional to say that like JP or EJ Manuel or anybody was going to be as good as Tom Brady.
There was a solid like 2-month time period at the beginning of the Tyrod era where I was like, yo, this guy could be a top 10 quarterback. But that quickly dissipated when I realized he couldn't see the middle of the field. But Walter Scales comes in, makes a great comment. He says, remember a few years ago when Pats fans thought Stidham was going to be the best quarterback in the East? Dave, you mentioned a couple of shows ago how cringeworthy that like Nathan Peterman QB1 tweet was. Listen, that's nothing compared to Jared Stidham sitting on a fucking throne.
Yeah,
I don't know who set up that photo shoot, but oof, like literally, that is or was straight up delusion right there. Like that is delusion personified right there. Jared Stidham on a throne. That
was
bad, real bad. All right, gentlemen, any parting thoughts before we head out here? Maybe Ryan, remind people where they can find you on social media and talk about maybe some of the things you got in the works here at Cover One.
Yeah, so at SportsRoc2 on Twitter, it's right. Not my microphone. It's over right here. SportsRoc2 on Twitter. Not really good at the mirroring thing. And yeah, I'll be writing some stuff. I think this week I'm calling it RB1 elevator pitch. I'm going to kind of go through all the running backs and give him an argument for being running back one. And just keep it on. So I'll be pumping out stuff once a week, once every other week, even into the season. So just follow my account. Stuff will go out there. And yeah, that's really about it.
Hansen, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, I tweet basically nonstop all day. So if you follow me at UberHansen, I'll probably fill your feed with tweets. So if you don't want that, do not follow me because I'm constant. Saying that though, this week I will probably be trying to push out an article about bottom of the roster battles. So for probably like those final 5 spots on the roster, I'll also be working on improving my internet apparently. And then you can find a lot of my stuff, like me hanging out on like the Bills Reddit, our Buffalo Bills. I have another thing too. I'll just kind of throw this out there. I did create a Bills Wordle for anybody interested. It's called Hurdle. You go to hurdle.billsish.com. You can play that. That's got a new word every single day. I have no intention of stopping that. Yeah, I'm doing a little bit of everything. But like I said, you'll find me on Twitter every day, sometimes drunk, sometimes sober, mostly drunk.
Tomorrow's word is Tyrod, by the way. That's me tomorrow's word for the Wordle. No,
it might be.
Dave, I have a question for you before you go. Hansel mentioned how much he tweets from his handle. Question for you on the spot. Who tweets more? Me from the Air Raid handle or Hansel? Who tweets more on a daily basis, you think? Rough estimate.
I think you do. I think you do.
I think I might.
I mean, I think it's close. You guys are probably you're right up there with like Greg and Aaron, and like those guys are tweeting all the time. I have a ton of I actually have a ton of respect for you guys that are able to kind of get so many good tweets out there. Like I don't want to flood people's timeline with stuff that they don't need to see. You guys do enough. You're tweeting from the show account. That's enough for me. Like I just enjoy following you guys and interacting with your tweets. But I think Steve, you might have the edge.
Well, you know what's crazy about Judge is you're on West Coast time and I'll see a tweet from Air Raid or Judge at like 6 o'clock in the morning my time.
Oh yeah.
And I'm like,
Oh,
and I'm like, Judge, are you up at 3 a.m.? Like, are you waking up and just like?
Here's what you people don't understand, you East Coasters. Now that I'm a West Coast douche, here's what you don't understand is I can go to bed like right now, 10:30 or 7:30. I can go to bed right now, 7:30 West Coast time. Stanley Cup game 3 is about to end. I can watch all my sports and be in bed by 8:30. And then I can wake up at 4 a.m. and be stupid ass productive before I even go to work. It is an amazing lifestyle that I live. And if I want to sleep in, I can sleep in. So I highly suggest that you all move to the West Coast. Matt 716 comes in and says, West Coast douche for sure. So I do appreciate that. The 11 a.m. games are nice, a little keg and egg action. But we did have N8 come in. He says, hey, guys, love the Air Raid Hour. Just about to start listening, but I want to say can't wait for the pregame shows. Go Bills. So before we sign off here, just a quick reminder, we're taking a little 3-week break. We will be back July 18th, Monday, July 18th at 9 p.m. Eastern time for all you East Coast elites out there with our first part 1 of our training camp preview. And then we will be every Monday at 9 p.m. during the regular season to go along with our pre-game shows live before every game. So we'll be live before most games this year. Bill's schedule is buck wild. I've been outlining it and outlining our schedule, Dave, over the past couple of days. It's going to be weird, but we'll make it work, and we'll be live for at least an hour, hour and a half before every single Buffalo Bills game this year. So for myself, for Dave, for our 2 special guests, thank you to our 2 special guests this evening, and thank you guys in the comment section. Seriously, there's no other football team or sports team really that at this portion of the offseason can push 100 live viewers, can get thousands of watches on repeats and on demand, can have a comment section full of people just making awesome comments and absolutely carrying segments for us. So Bills Mafia, you are literally like no one else. It's going to be a tough 3 weeks walking away, but we're going to come back rested and recharged. And until next time, ladies and gentlemen, and for you guys down the bottom, we finished everything with Go Bills. I think you guys have seen the show enough to know that. So until next time, ladies and gentlemen, Bills country, let's ride and go Bills.
Go Bills.
Go Bills.
Whoa, we went too quick here, John. We're not even ready. We're going to do it one more time. We got to go Dave, then Hansen, then SportsRoc.
Oh, I didn't know we were waterfalling.
Yeah.
We're waterfalling. We're waterfalling. Bills country, let's ride. Go Bills.
Go Bills.
Go Bills.
Go Bills.
Are we having fun yet?